Founded in 1729, Arlington Street continues today as a gathering place for progressive people of faith in the greater Boston area and beyond. We are located at the corner of Arlington and Boylston Streets, across from the Public Garden in Boston, Massachusetts. Arlington Street Church, gathered in love and service for justice and peace.
Along the border of any governed region, there exists a value which must satisfy its laws. We don't need to be solving differential equations to feel this truth. This week, we saw some fascinating border conditions, from the tragic journey of the rhetoric and the threats in the war with Iran and Lebanon to the breathtaking splendor of the astronauts on the Artemis II, making their way the farthest any humans have been from planet Earth. The news cycle was an emotional roller coaster, which I suppose we're all getting used to these days. So whether they're just rules someone made up or is making up as they go along, as in the case of our current president, or ways to describe the precise principles where forces, elements, and orbits meet, as was critical for that space mission this week, it matters how we take in the rules that apply to our particular situation. You felt it as you worked together on the project of getting the balloon from the front to the back of the sanctuary. Everyone dives in thinking they know what the job is, but oh, whoops, there's a new rule, and now we have to start over. Determined. Try and fail again to solve. At a certain point in life, we often manage to set ourselves up in conditions where we know the rules pretty well. We have a sense of who we are to our friends and our family, who they are to us, and there may be different understandings of norms from one relationship to another, but we know our landscape. Who to call when you need bail and who to call when you need to wail. Who you will show up for no matter what the cost, and who will always have a seat at your table. If we're working in the working world, we have a sense of what our jobs are, what success looks like there. We have a sense of the structure of our days, our months, our years, the balance of time we want to spend in rest and activity. And we understand the social rules of those settings that we inhabit. What's acceptable to say and do and what's not, how to modulate our own natural tendencies to fit in and get along, and where we can go to let our freak flags fly. But when an unexpected change happens, we have to reevaluate the rules. Someone enters our space who doesn't understand them, and we're suddenly forced to explain the reasons we do things like we do. And in the process, we realize we're maybe not so sure why we do the things we do. And in some cases, on further inspection, they don't make a lot of sense. They are just something someone made up. You might be familiar with the classic story of the holiday ham. A newlywed couple is preparing a ham to host their first holiday feast with commingled family, and the event's main chef, let's call her Sally, starts to cut the ham in half before putting it in the oven. Her wife, Maggie, looks over to her shoulder and says, "Why are you cutting the ham in half? Does it cook better that way?" "I don't know," says Sally. "That's just how my mother always did it, so that's what I do. Let's ask Mom when she gets here." So the crowd arrives and the ham is presented, and Sally asks her mom, "Why do we cut the ham in half before we cook it?" And her mom says, "I don't know. It's just what I watched my mother do. Let's ask her when we go to visit later this afternoon." And then on the visit to the care facility where Sarah's grandmother lives, after the general pleasantries are covered and she's caught up on the family gossip, they ask, "Grandma, why do you cut the ham in half before cooking it?" And she says, "Oh, well, that goes way back. Grandpa and I had a tiny stove and the oven couldn't hold a whole ham. So I cut it in half so it would fit in the oven." And that is how, 2 generations later, cutting the ham in half was just the way it was done. So what's interesting about this story is not only that there was received wisdom that was passed down without question, We all know that happens in families, and in fact, we often celebrate or commiserate about it. But the other interesting thing is the fact that the questioning, when it happened, came from someone outside that family system. Just observing what was happening and asking curiously about it. That created the opportunity for insight, for storytelling, for a new understanding of at least one sliver of how things have come to be as they are. If only everything were as easy to figure out as that holiday ham. We're in this sustained moment of reckoning in our culture. A lot of assumptions about what we had thought about the way we do things around here in the United States have turned out not to be as sturdy and reliable and upright and exceptional as Americans have told themselves we are. A new negotiation is happening as we face free fall in the wake of a government that doesn't abide by very many of the core rules we thought were unbreakable. The systems we thought were in place to keep them in check have been corroded or corrupted, and we're looking around for what to trust, how to behave in this lawless landscape. And it's no accident that this has come about on the heels of great strides in anti-racism, awareness and growing acceptance of the wide spectrum of gender and sexual orientation, exposure of the abuses of men in power. Bringing people who have been at the margins into the center of public life has shown that the system never really worked for everyone, as our democratic myths promised it did, or it would. The child watching the parade has now become a whole crowd pointing out that the emperor has no clothes. And in the destabilizing free fall, there are a lot of people being pulled down. So as we work outside these walls to organize, to resist, to show up in solidarity with those who are being targeted at any given moment, we also have the opportunity within this community to practice the kind of work that's needed to align our practices with our values. Like the ham being cut in half, we can forget that the reason our congregations are self-governing and rooted in covenant is that our forebears were trying to create an antidote to the abuses of power and corrupt practices of the Church of England and the Roman Catholic Church. Our forebears themselves were definitely flawed and capable of their own abuses of power, don't get me wrong. They wrested this land from native peoples and profited from the slave trade. But the legacy that we have kept in our ways of being together, of determining our shared future and navigating through turbulent times, those practices are actually what's kept us evolving. Not listening to a single authority, but discerning what's right as we join each other deeply in faithful reflections among us. Testing our assumptions by staying in conversation with our neighbors and with our deepest inner ways of knowing. In true community, where people are able to be fully who they are, shared meaning, shared practices, and shared direction have to be discovered, negotiated, and created together. All of that unfolds at the speed of trust and blooms when conditions are ripe after months, years, sometimes decades of tender care and nurture. The privilege and the challenge of our covenantal faith is that it needs constant tending. Being held in covenant makes us responsible for ourselves and one another in ways the rest of the world tells us is a waste of time. But we know offers us a chance to grow beyond who any of us individually could be on our own. And definitely further than we would get having deep thoughts with the New York Times at the cafe down the street. Our covenantal faith asks us over and over again to hold in tension our individual needs and the needs of community, our individual comfort and the discomfort of fully living a shared mission. As we try and fail again to solve, our roots are planted in the soil of humility and of compassion. That is the ground of every spiritual quest worth embarking on. So this faith that takes time and care and attention is countercultural in all the ways that we need in this moment, my friends. The destination is so much sweeter for the souls we grow on the journey, no matter how long it might take. So let us hold firm in our faith that together we are wiser than any one of us alone. That on our path we are held in a love beyond belief, and that our destination is a love that sees, knows, and redeems us all. So may it be. Amen. My friends, let's take a moment to imagine all of the features of that land where we might be found. You'll have your own to add, but let's say there's joy, there's play, there is laughter, there is enough for everyone. There is deep, deep love that is felt by each and every person. All can be free to be exactly who they are, and we create peace on this earth. May that be our legacy, and let us share our wish for that as we raise our hands, palms out, Zoomers to the sides of your squares, and those of us in the sanctuary sending out all of that beautiful vision of the world that can be if we make it so. Sending it out from our hands in widening circles to span the globe. Feel it from those around you, and then bring it back to heart center, carrying the love that is the spirit of this congregation until we meet again. Let the service begin when the service ends. Amen.
2, 3, 4.
We are located at the corner of Arlington and Boylston Streets, across from the Public Garden in Boston, Massachusetts. Arlington Street Church, gathered in love and service for justice and peace.